Well, hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to address my main audience with something that definitely directly relates to cello. And so I've been making these style videos over on Justin's Thoughts. If you like this style, check it out. But this one is for you guys, so I hope you enjoy. Now, this thought is seriously how to improve the fastest possible. Now, you might have seen in the other video that about the audition that I was doing that I've been utilizing this method to improve at jazz like way faster than I ever have. And I just wanted to expand upon the principles of that here. Now, it relies on a few things, I think, the most important of which is the field of systems dynamics. It kind of sounds like a boring word or like a technical word, and it does come out of MIT, but systems dynamics is a fascinating field because it sort of tells you what's really going on in the world, no bullshit. It really gets to the heart of what is really happening, and at the end of the day, what people with capital choose to believe about how to react to the world. Because they hire systems dynamicists to help them figure out what's going on in their businesses. So the thing about systems dynamics is it is essentially the practice of mapping how every part of a system connects to each other. Every part. It does get as complicated as you would imagine from that. There's massive charts. They have notations for how to connect things. And they even use advanced math to try to get even further into that. Now, that's all beyond the scope of this video, and I'm not a systems dynamicist, but I have read a bit of the textbook. I'll link it below, and I find the whole field fascinating. I've thought about it a lot the last few years, and I think some of the principles are intuitive and easy to integrate into your everyday thinking. So one of the most important aspects of systems dynamics is the core axiom that you always assume that people are acting in good faith, in their best interests, and rationally as they see it. Isn't that very different from what we hear on the news? We hear on the news this sort of hyper-individualistic thing. Oh man, all these people are going crazy over here, I guess. It couldn't be anything in their environment. At the heart of it, systems dynamicists know that if you see behavior that you don't otherwise like, you have to figure out what in the system is causing that. And this kind of relates to, I love this saying. So when people say like, oh, human nature is to be greedy. Well, that's human nature under capitalism. It would be like only observing a human underwater and concluding that it's in human's nature to drown. Oof. I love that one. But back on track, systems dynamics. The most important aspects are just which things affect other things. And the ways that things affect other things happen in two types of loops. One is called a positive feedback loop, and one is a negative feedback loop. And this doesn't necessarily have to do with like assigning a value like it's a good thing or a bad thing. It just has to do with whether it's a self-reinforcing loop or whether it's a self-diminishing loop. So an example of a self-reinforcing loop is when you start to move more. When you start to exercise more, you get stronger, you oftentimes lose weight, so you're literally lighter, and as a result of that, it becomes easier to move, and so you end up moving even more, typically. Now, at a certain point, the amount of movement that is possible to do becomes so much that you actually have to focus on it. You actually have to feed yourself for it, and those end up becoming the limiting factors that keep that from going to infinity, but it happens down the line. At the beginning, there's a positive feedback loop. Now, a negative feedback loop is the opposite. Now, I sort of described it as the self-limiting thing, but, an example of a negative feedback loop is just like putting money into a system that's always taking it. Trying to enact a policy to do X, and you only make the situation worse. So some of the famous things in systems dynamics are like the highway paradox, induced demand. That may or may not be true, but I'm not an economist or anything again, so go watch Unlearning Economics if you want to actually start learning about economics. I will also link that below. But, okay, what does this have to do with cello again? So systems dynamics, you have to picture what is going on in the system. Now, what I love about some of the stories of systems dynamics is that sometimes they'll work with a company, and the company is working so hard at whatever. Maybe they're working so hard at making their factory as efficient as possible, but they're still coming up underwater, and like in terms of income, not like in terms of the joke I made earlier, but they're finding themselves coming up underwater. And you know, so it's like, okay, we're not getting enough return for our stuff. Can we even fix this? Can this be made viable, right? And the systems dynamicist is going to think about the supply chain. The systems dynamicist is going to figure out how long it takes and like how much volume of different things is produced. They're going to figure out how the distribution network happens after the fact. They're going to just really take into account everything going on. And sometimes they'll find something. They'll be like, now listen, like, yeah, you can make your factory super, super efficient, but people are only, able to buy this at a certain rate. So there's no way to overproduce for it. Now, if you were able to find a way to open up the market more or whatever, then your efforts to produce more would result in more sales. You would see that effect more. You know, that's just a hypothetical example. There's all sorts of ways. Like maybe it's the supply chain to you that's the biggest problem, and being able to open that up can, like, you know, improve your efficiency. There's just stories of, like, you know, the portion that the company was concerned about is like, you know, by the systems dynamicist said it's like 18% of everything going on. And then they identify this portion that is like 60% of what's going on and can be like massively improved. So that is the core concept that we can apply to cello. And I think it might not always be clear exactly what is the thing that needs the most attention. But an example from my history the last year and a half is that last summer I started watching Theo Tanchek's videos, and I had a consultation with him because I started to get fascinated with this idea that there's sort of like an ideal way to use the human body, and that, you know, elite athletes sort of intrinsically know how to do that, and so they're training. So it's like, okay, well, am I sitting at the cello the best I can? You know, because otherwise I can be practicing my butt off, practicing scales, practice listening, practice along to things, but then I'll have maybe an inconsistency or whatever because my body's constantly changing. So for a while, I went from practicing 2 to 3 hours a day, or at least, you know, that's the intention, to being willing to practice as little as half an hour a day if that meant that practice was with perfect posture. So I figured out how to balance. I figured out how to slowly strengthen my upper body. It took time. I had to, really be thinking about the posture. But the thing is, again, anything else that I'd worked on with music before that, that's all within this realm, right, of potential musical knowledge. However, there was this huge part I was missing, which is, am I consistent? Am I sitting at the cello with the best biomechanics possible? Am I actually making it work for myself? So for a while, it wasn't even playing cello as much that was the improvement. It was the improvement in like my own body structure. So sometimes the thing that's going to help you improve the most will be things like, I just need to learn as many tunes as possible, right? I literally just need to know more melodies. I'm kind of in that boat right now, feeling like I just need to catch up on like all these old songs. Sometimes the thing that you need to work on the most is scales. I mean, sometimes it is the basic things. Sometimes the thing you need to work on the most is your own mental health. Sometimes the thing you need to work on most is a supplementary hobby that keeps you feeling juiced and ready to come back to the instrument. Sometimes the thing that's going to help you improve the most is to be able to take some time away from it to come back with perspective. So these are all just examples of things you have to really process for your own life. But I think that if you are willing to not continually, because you got to like commit to something for at least a few days, but every few days, every few weeks, every few months for sure, just reflect on what is the single most important thing I could be working on to improve. So instead of just feeling this endless drudgery, I have to learn all these scales, I have to learn all these tunes. I mean, yeah, but like if you're only focused on one of those elements, there is a lot that goes into being a musician. So making sure that you're working on whatever gives you the most return, then you'll come back and like, oh, learning tunes is easy. because you've worked on the other thing that allows you to be able to more quickly learn tunes. So that's why it works. That's the point. We covered a hell of a lot of topics in this video, so I know that some of it might not have made sense. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have questions about it, or any specifics, whatever. But I really wanted to share this concept. I think it is just so profoundly important. I think that understanding systems really is a significant way to get our heads out of some of the propaganda that we have about a hyper-individualized world, about a world where things can just be tasked to happen without care for what the environment around it is. Let your imagination run wild with all the things I could be meaning by that. But, again, I think it's been important. So, it is. Just a thought. Y'all have a nice day. And check out the other channel if you like this sort of stuff. Bye.